Hello everybody, my name is Cassandra and welcome to my temple. I will not be bashing my ex in this video. I really want this to be an example of how two people can grow up in very different Jewish households with very different values and views on Israel. I too am Jewish. However, my relationship to being Jewish is a little more complex. Yeah, I'm just gonna have to give you guys some context for this story. For those of you who don't know, in Judaism, being Jewish has to be passed down through your mom. My mom is not Jewish, my dad is Jewish. And so my grandpa sat me down when I was young and said something like, technically, your mother has to be Jewish in order for you to be Jewish, but you're still Jewish, was sort of what he said. And I got that from a lot of Jewish people, including the guy I was dating in 2018. So I never really felt like I was part of the club. My grandpa, who is Jewish, grew up during the Depression in the Bronx, never talked about Israel, really ever. I really racked my brain, you guys. That says a lot about who my grandparents were. They talked a lot about being Jewish and growing up Jewish in the Bronx, but they never really talked about Israel, ever. And if they did, it was not a memorable thing. My grandparents were not religious. My dad definitely is not religious. My grandparents were culturally Jewish. We would celebrate Hanukkah, Passover, and Rosh Hashanah, sort of. So there's some context for the kind of Jewish family I grew up around. So I started dating a Jewish boy whose grandparents were in concentration camps, survived concentration camps. Politically, his family was like centrist, Republican, centrist. They said they voted for Obama kind of situation. Progressive. I wouldn't say progressive necessarily. I would say reserved. I would say conservative relative to my family. Centrist vibes. His family was very nice. They were, especially at first, I could tell they haven't really talked to a lot of Black people. That kind of everyone they know is kind of white and Jewish, and that their whole community is kind of white and Jewish. And, you know, there's just like some... But they were nice people. I do not want to bash anyone here, but I do want to lay out the kind of family he came from. Okay, it's 2018. The only thing I know about Israel and Palestine is that Israel was created after World War II inside of this place called Palestine. And with that rudimentary knowledge, I was like, I can understand why Palestinians would be upset that a group of foreign people are coming and living on their land. Like, I can understand why there is tension in that region. Whenever I would see pro-Palestine posters and stuff, there would always be like a little question mark, like, is that coming from any anti-Semitism? Like, I didn't really know. I didn't assume that it was, but I was like, I hope that's not coming from any anti-Semitic place. Now, this guy, again, his grandparents were in the Holocaust, and his grandpa, from all the stories he has told me, was a little racist. I had never met his grandparents. They both passed away before we started dating. But from everything he told me, he definitely hinted to me that his grandpa probably would not have approved or would not have seen me as Jewish. And that was something I was kind of used to from my experiences with Jewish people. They never really considered me Jewish. They're like, oh, well, you know, you're not really Jewish, that kind of stuff. Being Jewish, for a lot of Jewish people, doesn't look like this. Doesn't look like this. You know what I mean? But I question, now that I'm saying that, if my dad was Jewish and my mom was white, if their perspective of me might have been different, or their reception of me might have been different. I ask him, I says, what do you think about Israel and Palestine? He did this with his hand. He said, Israel no matter what. And I thought, I'm going to challenge that. First of all, I was expecting like a much longer response than that. I thought, because he had been to Israel before, and because he has a much stronger identity in being Jewish, and he has a lot of roots in the Jewish culture and all that. I thought he would have explained that in more detail, but the answer I got was Israel, no matter what. With his hand, he went like this with his hands, and being someone who likes to argue, I like to. I wanted to challenge that because it just seems so absolute. It just seems so absolute. I was like, Israel, no matter what. Okay, well, what if Israel was doing something really terrible to Palestinian folks? Like, what if Israel was doing something really, really bad? Now, Israel wouldn't do that. Israel, no matter what. No matter what. I was taught Israel, no matter what. And so I kept asking him in hypotheticals, what if Israel was doing something terrible? And he kept defending Israel, even in this hypothetical sense. And I remember thinking, like, this is weird. Like, what are his values actually? Like, why is he so unconditional in his support of this place? Again, this was all hypothetical. It was all, I didn't know shit. This was 2018. I didn't know shit about Israel or Palestine. I was just saying things like, what if, we have to support, we need Israel. He gave me like all of these, like, we need an Israel, like Israel is so important to Jewish people. I was like, I didn't say all that. I'm not saying like we get rid of Israel. I'm just saying, what if Israel was doing something horrible? Would you still support Israel? And he kept saying yes. And then I had to give specific examples. Hypothetically. I kept having to say that. If Israel was doing this, would you still support Israel? And it took like an hour of that kind of back and forth for him to concede, like, okay, hypothetically, if Israel was doing something truly heinous, actually doing something truly heinous to Palestinians, maybe I would not be in support of Israel. And at the time I had no idea, like I didn't know what Zionism was. I didn't understand. I was just like, usually support for anything has conditions. And so I just had this impulse to challenge him on this unconditional stance he was taking. Because again, I like to argue, and I wanted to figure out what the hell that was about. I wanted to bring this story up because had that conversation happened after October 7th, had that conversation not been hypothetical, it could have gone a completely different way. So this really goes to show how deep Zionism goes. And because we dated for so long, almost 5 years, looking back on it, I really understand that his unconditional support for Israel was somehow wrapped up in the love he had for his grandparents. He was very close to his grandparents. They were very present in his childhood. They taught him a lot. They loved him very much. He comes from a close-knit family. That in even conceiving of a situation where he would not be in support of Israel was painful. And I could feel there was like guilt in it. There is like that going against Israel was going against his family and going against being Jewish. Like it was wrapped up in all of that other kind of stuff. And again, having been around this guy for so long, I understood how much he loved his family and how deeply important his grandparents were to him. And I think that was really, really deeply wrapped into his perception and his attachment to Israel, because he was taught to hold Israel like that by his grandparents, by his grandpa, I think specifically. I would argue that Jewish people sort of got their white card after Israel was created. I'm not saying that anti-Semitism went away, but I think the white card became more available. My grandparents grew up in America before Jewish people were white. And I think that really informed, also my grandparents grew up in the Bronx and grew up during the Depression. My grandpa maintained his socialist values well after World War II. Okay, that's all I have to say. I will see you in the next video. Bye.